Hello and welcome back. So I've been getting a ton of questions about fantasy goaltending and what to do. Guys that I've been asked about: Gustafsson, Fleury, Skinner, Campbell, the Carolina tandem, Buffalo, Toronto goaltending. I'll try to cover as much of that as I can in this video. I'll get you some data so that you can make some better decisions. Spoiler alert, I don't have a lot of answers. A lot of this requires a crystal ball, which I do not have, but I do have access to some data, and I'll show you that, and we'll walk through some of these examples and take a look at what you might want to do about some of these guys and how you can replace some of these guys in the short term. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so what we're looking at here is team expected goals against versus the team goals saved above expected. Actually, this is goaltending, goals saved above expected, so you'll see each goaltender here. So right off the bat, we have Kakkonen and Blackwood, two completely unownable goalies. They're expected to give up 4.3 per game, and they're giving up more than that. Blackwood started pretty well, but Kakkonen has played slightly better lately, but we're not going to talk about them. You shouldn't own them at all. So we'll just cover them up with the goalie hub. So we'll start it off by talking about Minnesota, because their goaltending situation I've been getting a ton of questions about. So Gustafsson is all the way down here. Expected 3.2 goals against, 3.26. He's given up more than that. Obviously, minus 6.7 is not good. The save percentage is .871. That's virtually unownable for fantasy. And if you look at the goalie hub over there, you can see the two side by side. So Fleury and Gustafsson. Gustafsson has slightly better save percentile, meaning he's facing more shots and he's making more total saves. But if your league doesn't have that, he's not really good. Goals saved above expected, first percentile. So he's the absolute lowest that you can go, and he's the lowest on this chart, as you can see. Fleury has been slightly better. The save percentage is a little bit better. The goals against is actually reasonable at 2.8 compared to 4.9 for Gustafsson. Fleury's had two good starts, two bad starts, and a good relief effort against the Rangers. So those two good starts are floating his goals against and helping him out a little bit. And the team defense isn't terrible, 39th percentile. There are teams way below them in terms of, better. To the left over here is better teams, so we'll get to some of these in a minute. To the right is worse, obviously San Jose being way over there behind the goalie hub right now, but the team defense is not great. But what happened in the offseason, Matt Dumba was not re-signed. He goes over to Arizona, and now all of a sudden Arizona's goaltenders are expected to give up 2.78 goals against, which means their defense is improved from last year, even though Matt Dumba is not that great of a player. So just looking at his player hub, he was a mid-70s player in his prime. He was down to like a mid-30s player in terms of completeness rating on my rating chart. So he's not really the same player that he used to be. And if you look at the advanced numbers, he's not that great of a defenseman. But for whatever reason, Minnesota is struggling without him, and Arizona has taken a huge defensive increase because of him, or maybe not because of him, but just with him on the team. But then you factor in the injury to Jared Spurgeon, and this should come down. When Spurgeon's back, they should slightly move over into this range around 3 goals against per game expected. So what I've been telling you, if you own Gustafsson, wait until Spurgeon comes back, because that will give the true look and feel of what this defense should be. The team itself is not playing that poorly, and they're actually getting a decent amount of goal support. So they have a ton of problems to correct in terms of first period goals against. They're also giving a lot up in the third period, even though they are scoring a lot in the third period. But they do have some stuff to clean up. But if you own Gustafsson, the reason why you would want to hold on to him is this. It might be a little cut off here, but this was his numbers heading into this season. So this is last year: 39 games, 22 wins, 2.1 goals against, .931 save percentage, 3 shutouts, and 24 goals saved above expected. So as I mentioned, Minnesota was around 3 expected goals against per game. That's where I would expect them to be close to once Spurgeon gets back. And this is what you're hoping to get out of him. Obviously, what you're getting this year is nothing close to that, but I would wait until Spurgeon gets back before you drop Gustafsson. If you need to start Fleury in the meantime, they'll probably give him a couple more starts. He wasn't as, necessarily as great as Gustafsson last year, but a .908 save percentage, 6.55 goals saved above expected. So he was a little bit better last year than he was this year, or has been this year. So these two guys are very difficult to own right now. I would stick with it until Spurgeon comes back, and then you'll get the good, true test of what this defense can handle. and then you can make your judgment call from there. Now let's move on to another team that I've been getting goaltending questions about, and that's Carolina. So looking at this chart here, Freddie Andersen is over here. That's not bad at all. He's a little bit below expected, but the team exposure is so good that that's why you'd own him. And you can see that on the player hub, that far blue bar all the way over on the right. I got to switch right over here. That's what you're getting out of Andersen. Usually this team is very good defensively, and they usually have decent goaltending. But Andersen's save percentage, 894, is not great. And that's being reflected in his goaltending hub as well, as he's 36th percentile in save percentage. So you're not getting what you need out of Andersen, and it doesn't matter because now he's gone, and we don't know what the timetable is. He's got blood clotting issues. That's pretty open-ended. When we look at Ronta, the team exposure is still really good, 82nd percentile, but then you're looking at an even worse save percentage. He somehow has a shutout. So without that shutout, the save percentage is probably sub 850. And then you're looking at minus 2.98 goals saved above expected. So he's well below what the expected numbers are suggesting. I think his metric is being buried somewhere behind one of these other guys, but nonetheless, not necessarily ownable right now at an 870 save percentage. So then they call up Jaro Halak, or they give him a professional tryout. We don't have any data on him this year. Last year, he was around a 903, 905 save percentage goalie, and he does thrive in a good defensive environment. So if you want to take a shot on Halak, that would be another option. But the other guy that most people were talking about, myself included, coming into this year was Kochetkov. This has been abysmal this year. Now, I don't necessarily have the games played offhand. Usually I include that in the tooltips here, but for whatever reason that fell through the cracks. But an 836 save percentage and a 4.4 goals against is not ownable. Minus 4.63 goals saved above expected. So you're getting that team exposure, but he just hasn't done it this year. You want to look at what he did last year. It's a really stark contrast. Last year, their defense was even better, 99th percentile, 2.6 expected goals against per game. He was 4.92 above expected, a 909 save percentage, 4 shutouts, and 12 wins in 24 games. So really good win percentage there. And 2.5 goals against was really good as well. He was the 17th ranked goalie on our goalie hub, and that was with limited playing time. So that's why we were excited about him heading into this year, but you can obviously tell that it did not translate, and he has struggled this season. So if you're asking me what the play here is with Carolina, I don't really have an answer for you. Ronta is the guy who's going to be leaned on to get these starts. Maybe Halak is the answer, so keep your eyes peeled on the waiver wire, but they have to sign him before he gets into a game, so watch out for that signing. If he gets signed, you might want to go over and pick him up, throw a waiver claim at him or whatever. Kochetkov, if he gets called up, I would give him another shot. This is a small sample size that you were looking at before, so I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the best option just data-wise, but he has done it in the past, so I don't have a concrete answer for you, but Ronta's the starter for the time being. Halak, if he's available and gets some starts, you have to use a claim to put in on him or whatever, but this is a very tenuous situation. And as we look at some other teams on here, let's just look at some of the broad strokes. So one thing I wanted to mention, obviously here's Thatcher Demko all the way up here, 11.84 goals saved above expected, 947 save percentage. We talked about it in the preseason, the tandems that you would want, Vegas being the number one tandem, and this is why. So 932 save percentage for Thompson, 6.92 above expected, and then 6.44 above expected for Hill, and 938 save percentage. They're almost identical. This is looking like the Boston tandem of last year. And then speaking of Boston, you have Swayman at a 954 save percentage, and then you got Ullmark slightly above expected at a 926. So these are excellent tandems to own right now. Another tandem that I thought would be good to own would be LA. You're looking at Cam Talbot's goalie hub on the right, and he's been doing really well. So he's the number one rated goalie on the goalie hub right now. He changed 19 positions to an 88 overall right now. But the same cannot be said for Phoenix Copley, who is completely unownable at a 788 save percentage, minus 5.69 above expected. So he's been performing really poorly for LA. They might end up having to call up their backup. I think it's Riddick, who's their third string down in the AHL, that they might have to use because Copley is so bad right now. But that brings me to another team that we have to talk about, and that's Edmonton. You can see them here. Jack Campbell, minus 3.77 above expected, so he's well below expected. 873, and he just got sent down. He's going through waivers right now. Nobody's going to claim him, so he will get sent down, and they're hoping to potentially resurrect his game in the AHL. And then the big question is Stuart Skinner. So he's well below expected. 861 save percentage is atrocious. And the main reason you would have owned him, and the reason I was talking about him in the preseason, was because you wanted that team exposure, because they're going to have to, they're a team that is expected to win, and they were going to have to rely on one of them, and I just don't trust Campbell. And that is playing out right now. But as we look at Skinner's numbers, or Skinner's goalie hub, if I can pull it up on the fly here, the team exposure is not terrible. So as you can see here, there's teams way worse. And, even Toronto is worse than Edmonton defensively right now, which is kind of crazy to think about, because Edmonton leads the league in goals given up off the rush, which is insane, because obviously these two guys that are behind this goalie hub in San Jose, they're giving up goals left and right. So for Edmonton to be worse than them off the rush is alarming, but their overall team defense is not that bad in terms of expected goals against, but both goaltenders are performing horribly. So the save percentage, 861, unownable. Goals against, 3.7, could be worse, but it's not great. The total save volume is not bad, 124 saves on the year, but again, that's not going to be a nice silver lining for you if you're dealing with this level of performance. So what's the play here? Well, before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about Edmonton in general. So let's look at their offense for a minute, because that's what's going to drive their wins. And if you own Skinner, you're mainly looking for wins. So now what we're looking at is team expected goals for and shooting percentage. Don't mind that at the top. Just had to whip this up really quick. But you're looking at the expected goals for each team and their shooting percentage. You see San Jose way down at the bottom over here. You have Vancouver shooting at almost 11%, which is unsustainable. So it might be a good time to sell high on some of your Vancouver Canucks, because the number one team last year was around low 9%. So they are well above. I believe the number one team last year was Edmonton. So this is a big fall from grace for Edmonton, who's now down here. Now they're still reasonably good expected goals for at around 39. And they're in good company. Some other teams that you would want exposure to, some offenses that you would want exposure to, but their shooting percentage is 5.3%, which is really not good. And I'll show you what that looked like last year. So just looking at this year, here's 10.98% for Vancouver. Vegas is up there at above 9%. You scroll all the way down, and Edmonton is 29th. They're right there with Calgary, who, again, another team that should be better offensively. This could be a nice buy low on guys like Huberdeau and Kadri as they start to get going. Kadri's started to get going a little bit lately, but in terms of Edmonton, 5.37 is not sustainable. They have the 9th best power play right now, but last year they were historically great in first place, obviously. So I would expect, with the talent that they have and the expected goals for that they have, that this will increase. Now, if we look back to last year, Edmonton was number one at 8.76%. So that's two things to keep in mind. Vancouver was still really good last year, but they're 3% higher in terms of shooting percentage this year, so that could regress. And they're way higher than even Edmonton was last year. So there is some regression to Vancouver, offensively speaking, but we're looking at the defense and we're looking at goaltending as we keep all of this in mind. So for Edmonton to drop from first in shooting percentage all the way down to 27th in shooting percentage is an anomaly, and this will correct itself. We have Draisaitl, who had a 7-game goalless streak, which was unprecedented. You have McDavid, who spent time, not in the lineup. He's potentially battling an injury or whatever. This is not necessarily sustainable. And if you think about it logically, they're going to have to make up a ton of ground once they get it going, and they're going to have to go on a pace where they're playing at a 650 win percentage clip in order to get back in the playoff hunt, and you will want whatever goaltender is playing for them when that happens. So this is prime for regression upward, closer to that 8% number, and when that happens, you're going to want exposure to the goaltending. So let's go back to the goaltending and take another look. So as I mentioned before, you don't want Campbell. He's now in the minors. Skinner is the option, unless they go out and trade for somebody. If they do, then you're going to want to monitor that. And obviously that guy will get taken in a lot of leagues, and there will be a ton of action trying to get that guy off waivers. But for now, if you have Skinner, just like what I was saying with Minnesota, wait until Spurgeon gets back. For Edmonton, wait until their offensive guys start to get going. Wait until that shooting percentage comes up and they start scoring some more goals. Now, what's going to come first? Is the goaltending going to improve and then the offense comes? Or is the offense going to improve and kind of paper over a lot of those deficiencies in net and then the goaltending will come? I don't know. And it's worth noting that Stuart Skinner is in a sophomore year. This could be a sophomore slump. He may never get it back. And if that's the case, then Edmonton's going to miss the playoffs and there will be huge changes. I would imagine Ken Holland gets fired. But for now, I would hold on to Stuart Skinner until the offense starts to click the way that they should. And, looking at this team defense, when that happens, this should be a reasonably good team to mine some fantasy value out of. Now, a couple other teams I wanted to talk about. Toronto, I've been getting a ton of questions about them, Joseph Woll and Samsonov. I don't see Woll on here, but here's Samsonov. He's 3 goals below expected, .871 save percentage. He's relatively unownable. And I'll pull up Joseph Woll on the hub so you can kind of compare. You can see here he's way above expected. He did have a dip that week. I talked about it in the weekly video last week, or week 4. He kind of dipped and had an .866 save percentage for that week, and it wasn't good. But even with that, he's at a .928 save percentage, 6.3 goals saved above expected. This is not including last night's game, by the way. The team exposure is not great because, as you can see here, they're giving up almost 3.5 goals against per game. So this is not the same defense that you're used to from Toronto, who is actually top 5 in the league for the last couple seasons, or at least top 10. So because of that, we were targeting both of their goaltenders in fantasy. But for right now, that team defense just isn't there. They're getting bailed out, and the offense bailed them out yesterday. And when Woll came in, he put up pretty good numbers and got the win for him. But I wouldn't necessarily go out and try to target Woll. If you have Woll and you're wondering what you should do about it, it's still a 1A, 1B situation. Samsonov isn't playing that great. Woll is playing better, so he's the 1A right now, but that could flip. Samsonov's a little bit more proven at the NHL level, so maybe once he can get his game back in order, it becomes more of a 50-50 split. But like I was saying to some of the Discord members, this is not necessarily the same defense that you're used to picking from that is really sound and stable. So what are some other options if you're looking for some other options? One guy I wanted to talk about is Peter Mrazek. So Soderblom is above expected here. The save percentage is .868, which isn't great. But then you have Peter Mrazek, 3.17 above expected, .923 save percentage, which is really good for a team that isn't expected to be this good, but they actually are performing pretty well defensively. So he's an option for you. He's probably available on your wire. He was sub 30% ownership last time I checked. So he's a guy that you could potentially, target. What you're going to want from this graph is the guys who are in this upper left quadrant, if at all possible. Now, another anomaly that I noticed was Philadelphia is really good defensively, which is kind of crazy to say out loud, but 2.5 goals against expected, and Carter Hart slightly below expected. At least that's what this is saying, but Hart was off to a tear to start the season. The team defense, as you can see on the right here, is really good. The save percentage at a .913 is pretty good. The goals against, the wins, got a shutout in there, and some save volume on top of all that. But you cannot own Sam Ersson. So in his absence, you look at Sam Ersson, he's at an .815 save percentage, 3.9 goals against, and minus 6.25 goals saved above expected. So in Hart's absence, you definitely cannot own Cal Peterson. You definitely cannot own Sam Ersson. You kind of have to just either go with Hart or go with another team because he's the only available option that's any good right now. At least, from what we've seen so far, maybe that changes. Maybe Ersson throws up a good game and his numbers come up. But for right now, that's the way that it is. Now, another team that's surprisingly good defensively is Arizona. And Vejmelka did have a rough week last week, so his numbers dropped significantly. He's down to a .904, and he's minus 1.8 goals saved above expected, but you're getting decent exposure, and they're winning some games. So I'll bring up Vejmelka here, and we can take a look at what his hub looks like if it pops up. Just got to clear that out and do it again. So as we look at Vejmelka, you can see the team defense, 91st percentile. He is below expected. The save percentage is right around league average. But it was better than that the first 3 weeks of the season. And then when you compare that and you look at Connor Ingram, who was one of the highest growers last week, he grew 30 points. He's up to a 63 rating now. The same team defense exposure, he's got a 919 save percentage and a 2.4 goals against. So if you're in a situation where you desperately need a goalie pickup, you're looking at Peter Mrazek, you're looking at Connor Ingram, and you're looking at some of these guys that may be available on your wire. Devon Levi is probably not available on your wire. He's another guy I had some requests talking about what to do about him or UPL. So Levi, a little bit below expected. The team is not bad in front of him, around 3 goals against per game expected. The save percentage is not great. Let me pull up his file because I haven't looked at it in a little bit, as we have to uncheck Ingram and then retype it in. But Levi, he started off slow. He's a rookie. So this is not a guy I was talking about in the preseason. I was not that high on for the reason of him being a rookie and just not having a lot of data on him. 3.4 goals against, 886 save percentage, not, 2 wins. I don't know how many starts that is. Don't have it off the top of my head, but below expected. I don't know what to make of this. He could improve. He could start to put it together. Luukkonen, he played really well for 2 games last week, and he got 4 starts in a row. So that was something that caught my eye. I tried to pick him up, and by the time I got him, he was back to playing the way that he does. 901 save percentage, 310 goals against, and then he's below expected as well. So there's not a whole lot to like in Buffalo's crease. So a couple teams that I was asked to talk about here, Minnesota, Carolina, Buffalo, Toronto, Edmonton. We've covered them all. I've given you a couple different options that you can look at. This is Ilya Sorokin, but Varlamov, I'm not sure if he's showing up on here because of a sample size type of thing, but we'll take a look at Varlamov. He's one of the better options on the waiver wire. He's usually available for you, and you can look at it and see why. So 8.8 goals saved above expected, 99th percentile in terms of save percentage, 972 save percentage, 2 wins, 1 goal against, 2 shutouts, which is really nice to have as well. This is a team that's usually good defensively. Right now, they're actually not that good defensively. As you can see, 3.55 goals, expected goals against. So they're not necessarily the same Islander team that we used to see be so good, in front of their goaltenders. But still, Varlamov is playing very well. He's a 57. So you can go out and pick him up. You can pick up Mrazek. Charlie Lindgren had a great game. And the reason why you want to think about that is the 3.2 expected goals against and that save percentage, 929 save percentage for Charlie Lindgren. He was a spot start type of option that you could have had. The rest of these guys are all starters. You got Ottinger, you got Cam Talbot, who we talked about a little bit before. Here's Shesterkin. Bobrovsky is throwing in another good season that's going to dupe a lot of you into picking him up, and then he's going to screw you over again, which is why I don't pick him up. And then speaking of guys I don't like picking up, Jordan Binnington actually playing really well at a 924 save percentage, even though his team defense is not great in front of him. And then one guy that I own, Jonas Johansson, these numbers are floated significantly by 2 shutouts. So let me just pull him up because he was one of the top goaltenders on the Goalie Hub. I believe he's in the top 10. But the main reason for that was because of the save volume. He's got 99th percentile save volume, meaning he's getting shelled. The team defense is 27th percentile, so not great there. As you can see here, they're in the bottom chunk of this graph. And then he's 5.5 above expected, but this 916 save percentage is factoring in 2 shutouts. So he's getting a bunch of wins because he's the starter for Tampa Bay, and they're going to bail him out a lot in terms of offense. The goals against isn't bad at 2.9, but the save percentage without those 2 shutouts is much lower than this, so do keep that in mind. He's a guy that I drafted or picked up right after the draft, dropped him after 2 weeks because it just wasn't working out. Then he goes up and puts 2 shutouts, so then I grab him back up, and he's terrible again. So whenever I drop him, I'll let you know, and then you can go and pick him up, and he'll put up a bunch of shutouts. But don't want to make this video too long. That's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you got some good information out of this. Hopefully this will help you with your goaltending decisions. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of answers for you guys. There's a lot of guys that are struggling. Korpisalo, Forsberg, Philip Grubauer still not putting it together. DeSmith right around average. There's a lot of guys that are probably available for you on your waiver wire or maybe trade targets that aren't necessarily the best options. I have Jacob Markstrom in 2 different leagues, and it's not helping at all. He's sub 900 save percentage, and the team isn't really great in front of him like they used to be under Daryl Sutter. and he's not that, he's slightly above expected. So not really a whole lot to get excited about from Markstrom, and I would expect Dustin Wolf to get a call up soon because their backup is not any better. So if Wolf gets called up, that's a guy to keep your eye on in terms of looking at some waiver claims or, picking a guy up off waivers. John Gibson has been outplayed by Dostal. I mentioned that in the weekly video. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you got something good out of this, and I'll see you in the next one.